One of my favorite Valentine's cards was sent to me by my older sister a few years ago. It goes like this. He was only a chocolate chip cookie, but I loved him. I met him at a party. There he was at the end of the buffet, a loner, the last one on the plate. He had a certain something, a sweetness, a sensuality. I felt as if I'd always known him, always hungered for him. When he looked at me with those warm brown eyes, oh, I melted. Before I knew it, I had my hands on him, my mouth in public. After that night, we were inseparable. With him, I could be myself. He didn't seem to care what mood I was in, how I looked, even if I gained weight. Together, we had the recipe for happiness. No one satisfied me like Chip. But then things changed. My friends said he was no good for me. He started to give me heartburn. I felt crummy, get it, crummy? But I knew it had to end. Now we've gone our separate ways. I hardly think of him anymore. Oh, if I see a certain TV commercial, a particular magazine ad, a coupon for 10 cents off, that old longing returns. And when we run into each other in the supermarket, well, we nod. We're friendly, but it's over. Now, I presume my sister sent me the card for two reasons. First, she knew my total lack of control when it comes to chocolate chip cookies. She once gave me a magnet that's on my refrigerator that says, "Raisin cookies that look like chocolate chip cookies are the reason I have trust issues." Don't give me any raisin cookies. And second, my sister knew that I, along with most of the women we know, would probably relate to the card. Many of us have had that kind of experience with relationships in our younger days of romance and angst. And that's why I have always felt a bit arrogant speaking at weddings on the subject of love and relationship or delivering sermons about them. I married at the age of 20 and divorced 9 years later. Since then, I've had several relationships with a capital R, none of them what you'd call successful. So perhaps it's no surprise that when I began conducting weddings during my seminary training, a friend pointed out to me one day that none of my ceremonies mentioned love. That little tidbit. But you know, why would they? Love was not something I had much faith in by then. Nevertheless, I have officiated at weddings, or before same-sex weddings were legal, services of Holy Union, for probably at least 250 or more couples, and they do now all mention love. With each ceremony, I conduct at least some of what would be considered premarital counseling, but I rarely know whether my weddings stick or not, since most of the couples I've married have been non-UUs, simply looking for a liberal minister to marry them, and I usually neither see or hear from them ever again. Of course, I've also counseled couples during their relationships and during or after their breakups. And I am fascinated not so much by the early romantic stages of a relationship or by the unhappy, sometimes bitter endings. Rather, I am intrigued and inspired by the ordinary, day-to-day loving that deepens throughout love's lifetime. I'm interested in the love which is found in the kitchens, in the midst of tiredness and annoyance, but which is able from time to time to touch again the tenderness and open its face to the skies. But oh my, some of the couples I've married come into my office so starry-eyed and innocent, talking much the same way as the character in the Valentine card. We felt as if we'd always known each other. They'll say, we can be ourselves with one another, etc., etc. In most cases, everything has been so perfect, I have to wonder, do they know really what they're getting into? Do they have a clue as to what the words for better or worse, in sickness and in health, can mean? When I first meet with a couple to plan their wedding, I ask them to tell me about their relationship, and I ask them why they want to get married, especially nowadays when there's no shame in just living together. I give them a packet with sample vows and readings, etc. And actually, I always first suggest that they write their own vows, even if they end up not using those during their wedding ceremony. It's a good exercise to explore just what it is they are willing to promise to one another. There are 2 readings from the packet that I provide that are probably the most popular. One by the 13th century theologian Thomas à Kempis, and the other a familiar quote from St. Paul's first letter to the Corinthians. Both readings are very poetic. Thomas à Kempis says that love flies, runs, and leaps for joy. Love knows no limits, ardently transcends all bounds, feels no burden, and sees nothing as impossible. And St. Paul's, you probably know. Love is patient and kind, seeks not its own good, is not easily provoked, is always charitable, always trustful, always hopeful, always steadfast. And those are good words. But do these young couples about to marry have any idea how difficult it is to sustain that kind of love, especially these days? Do they question how much Thomas à Kempis or Paul the Apostle even knew about love and relationships, given that neither were ever married? I remember when my future husband and I went to our first meeting with the Episcopal priest who was to perform our wedding ceremony back in 1965. Admittedly, we weren't an easy couple for this young man, interracial in the 1960s, with no jobs, still in college, with my future husband facing another 3 years of law school. To top it off, when the priest asked us in that first session whether we planned to have children someday, Kingsley quietly informed him that a baby was already on the way. We learned later that we were the first couple this poor priest had ever married. Oh well. So I can't blame him that he simply gave us a little pamphlet to read about marriage and sent us on our way. I don't remember much about that pamphlet other than how little help it offered us. Fortunately, however, Newsweek magazine ran an article around the same time about the number of young college couples getting married and the problems they were facing trying to work, go to school, sometimes having children. This article was much more helpful to us as it gave us a glimpse of the pitfalls ahead. And while it is true that despite that guidance, we still ended up in divorce court 9 years later, our ability to maneuver the difficult twists and turns of early married life and parenthood through undergraduate and graduate school was improved immensely because of that article. Those years of marriage were not a disaster by any stretch of the imagination. Neither of us regrets them, and we remain to this day very good friends. So when I perform a wedding ceremony for couples, I like to point out that they have embarked on a wonderful and powerful journey, but that it is not a journey that just happens effortlessly. I stress that while it may have seemed blissful and easy up till now, they will inevitably face both ups and downs of going the long haul together, of needing to choose again and again to remain open to love, especially during those periods where it seems to have flown away. Love and relationship rarely look like the depictions in the movies. Oh, it may start out that way. In the beginning, our love may fly, run, and leap for joy, as Thomas à Kempis suggests. But after a while, relationships can become a bit more mundane. In the midst of paying bills, raising children, nagging about household chores over and over, the passion first felt can somehow get lost. This is one reason lifelong relationships call for such courage. Yet when I hand couples that packet of sample readings, rarely do they choose any that speak of courage. They don't want to hear the words of Erich Fromm on their wedding day, who said that love is an act of faith, or the poet Rainier Maria Wilke, for one human to truly love another is perhaps the most difficult of all our tasks, the last test and proof, the work for which all other work is but preparation. St. Paul was right. Love does need patience and kindness, faith and hope, humility and truth. But all those qualities take work and intentionality. They are not necessarily natural human traits. So if the readings in a wedding ceremony were left up to me to choose, which sometimes they are, I would choose three kinds. First, I choose one such as this by Rilke, in which he said, "Only through the task of working on themselves can two people use the love given to them." I want people to understand that love calls them to bring their whole selves to the relationship with all their strengths and with all their vulnerabilities. And the only way they can do that is to enter the relationship as whole as possible, with a willingness to continue their own emotional and spiritual growth throughout their lives. The second reading I would choose speaks of the lulls in love, the occasional emotional distances. Anne Morrow Lindbergh, in her lovely book, Gift from the Sea, suggests that when we love someone, we do not love them all the time. She points out that relationships have an ebb and flow to them, just like the ocean. And the problem is that we leap at the flow of tide and resist in terror its ebb. And finally, I would choose a reading by the writer George Nathan, who said, "The man and woman who can laugh at their love and embrace with chuckles will outlast in mutual affection all throat-lumpy, cow-eyed couples. Nothing lives on so fresh and evergreen," he said, "as the love with a funny bone." Now, Nathan's words may be more important than all the others read at a wedding, for without a sense of humor, which offers us perspective, what relationship can survive the most difficult times? Real love does feel ordinary at times. It may not grow up like a wild iris in a field, but rather grow in the midst of everyday chaos. But it can grow. Its roots can deepen, its colors becoming clearer, its intricacies thickening, often without our even knowing it. That is the power of love. And that's why it is so important, I think, for you who are married or in a committed relationship to pause from time to time, perhaps on your anniversary or on Valentine's Day or more often, to seriously reflect on your relationship, on where it has traveled, the challenges it has met, the strengths it has given each of you, and then to renew your vows, to recommit yourselves to the relationship. I think that more than weddings, I enjoy conducting ceremonies for couples renewing their vows because they know this time what they're getting into. A couple of years ago, you may remember Garrison Keillor invited his listeners to write love sonnets for Valentine's Day. Of course, he received hundreds of them and could only read a few examples. It was indeed touching to hear so many beautiful sentiments written to spouses after many years of marriage. But the sonnet that touched me most deeply was one written by a woman to her husband as he was fixing their washing machine. She said she loved his 50-strong laugh and his pants pocket for her hand at his hip, but that mostly watching him work on their washer gave her a trust for tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that. Love does not grow up forever wild like an iris in the field, nor should it really. It grows instead where we least expect it, in kitchens, over washing machines, in the midst of children arguing and the paying of bills. Therefore, love does take great faith, honesty, care, and a trust in the ordinary. But if we are patient and watchful, we will see love from time to time and in great tenderness blink and open its face up to the skies. May it be so. Amen.